So today we're going to be shellacking some tweed cabinets, and we're going to use actual shellac flakes with some Behkol solvent, which is right here.
Why shellac flakes instead of premixed lacquer or polyurethane?
One of the problems I've seen when people try to do this project with a tweed cabinet is if you use a lot of lacquer, anything that's liquidy, it'll get underneath this seam, anywhere you see these seams, and it'll discolor it. And that sometimes when you see cabinets, you can tell that somebody did it because it's got all this brown from soaking up underneath there. So I like shellac because it dries super fast and you can really keep control of it. The other thing that's cool about it is it's really easy to do, even though it seems a little intimidating. First thing you want to do is take some shellac flakes. I'm gonna have to say shellac flakes 1,000 times before I get it right. Okay, and get yourself a jar. Just any jar as long as it's clean and it has a lid, and pour in some flakes. And I like to go about a ½ inch. That's about perfect. Okay, so we're not using whole much. And we're gonna start this process. Now, all we have to do is take our Behkol solvent. If you have Everclear, you can use that as well. And what we're gonna do is put the Behkol solvent in here with the flakes, and we're just gonna pour it right up until where the flakes are. So we'll just match it. Okay, just make sure. There you go. Go ahead. And what I like about this technique is two things. One, it's always important to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, but in this case, it doesn't have to be over-ventilated because we're gonna seal it up. We let it sit overnight, and here's the good part. If you see it clumping, don't worry about that. And you can, kind of swirl it if you'd like. The other thing is, if you look and it's not dissolving correctly, don't worry about that. Because the great thing about this is that the alcohol will dissolve the shellac. So if you have to add a little bit more alcohol, that's fine. But more importantly, the longer it sits, the more it will dissolve. It'll stay dissolved. Keep in mind that shellac will continually dissolve in alcohol. So what that means is that even when it's kind of solidifies and it becomes solid, you can still apply alcohol to it and get it to dissolve back to the liquid again. So now I'm going to show you how we're going to do this. I went ahead and removed everything off the cabinet. This is the first thing I want to tell you. You have to remove everything. So those of you that are probably going to do like the Blues Deluxe or Blues Junior that has the badge on there, that has to come off. Everything has to come off. So there's no real reason to show you how to disassemble it. If you have rubber feet on the bottom, I would go ahead and take them off and install the screws back so that you have something to lift it up off the table. So now I'm going to show you how to mix the next part. Now that we have our kind of honey consistency, we're going to cut it into a more liquid solution because we want it to dry quickly. That's the beautiful thing about shellac. It really will dry fast. The important part though that you have to understand is that the alcohol dries really fast. So whenever I'm not using it, put that lid back on because this will start to harden as the alcohol dries out of it. So I'm going to use a turkey baster. And then what I want you to do is just go ahead and put some of the thicker solvent in there. And I'm going to do 2 of these. And now what I'm going to do is add some alcohol. Now the problem is if I use the turkey baster and I put it in the alcohol, I'll be contaminating the alcohol with the shellac. So I'm going to have to pour this in another jar and pour some alcohol in it. This is to drink. I'm just kidding. And now I'm going to do 4 of the alcohol, and that's a 2-to-1 ratio, but I've seen it done 3-to-1 and I've had success both ways, but I'll do 2-to-1, and then if it looks good, I'll go with it, and knowing that I can always add 1 or 2 more of the alcohol or even add some more of the shellac back in. We're going to go ahead, go with the chords, which is basically like saying go with the grain. Nice even strokes, and be very aware of where you're starting and where you are, because again, it gets hard to see it. The cut or mix that I'm using can look or feel dry within 20 seconds.
Why do you have to coat the tweed?
If you get a tweed amp, you will find out real fast that it is very unforgiving. And the tweed, it gets basically chipped up, it gets torn, it gets stained. And a lot of people are like, yeah, that's the relicking process, that looks great. And I agree. I love tweed when it gets a little kind of broken in. But that being said, sometimes the stains aren't what you want because they don't look very cool. It's the wrong kind of stain.
Do you coat all the tweed?
I do coat all of the parts of the tweed that are not visible.
What if I mixed it like you did, but it's too sticky?
If you're doing this and it feels too sticky, or it's coming out too dark, or it's coming out too light, you can mess with the cut. And cut is the term for the mix. I feel happy with this mix. And you can see, look how much we have. You know what I mean? I'm sure a lot of you, when you see this video, are going to be, we're talking to the screen about how that's not enough. And the other great thing about this is, and like I said before, let's say you did a spot and it got too thick right here somewhere. Remember, you can just use some alcohol, thin it back down, or thicken it back up. You're in control. It obviously has durability issues. It's not like polyurethane. It doesn't last forever. It's not caked on like a candy coat, but that's also why it yellows and it changes. There's some beautiful things about these lacquer and shellac finishes in the way that they patina and they look, and the ease of working with them. So that finish is almost dry. We're gonna go ahead and let it harden and cure for a little while, and then we'll apply the second coat. I'm gonna go ahead and cut in a little bit more. For the second coat, I'm gonna cut in, just a little bit more shellac, because I feel like that this hasn't really been super thick or anything. It's been really easy to apply. And I want this second coat to really, a little teeter-tottery because of those screws. I want the second coat to amber it a little bit, just a little bit. Yeah, perfect. Checking to see how sticky it is. If it's too sticky, I need to add some alcohol.
When you say sticky, how sticky or tacky should it be when wet?
Think of painter's tape. When you touch painter's tape, that's too tacky. So so if you're touching it and it's got a little, even if something as light as painter's tape, you feel like it's, kind of sticking to you a little bit that way. That's too sticky. So you go ahead and you would cut that a little bit more with some alcohol.
What kind of brush should I use?
Paintbrush I'm using is a hobby store paintbrush. It is a little nicer grade than I could get at my Home Depot. I don't use the crazy expensive ones, but this one wasn't like a $3 paintbrush. This was like a $5 one.
Will coating the cabinet change the sound?
I would imagine, that obviously shellacking the cabinet would change the way the cabinet sounds. I think the sound is going to be so minor that if I did a sound sample, the amount of work it would take to do the video before and after, to assemble the amp and then disassemble the entire amp, then shellac it, I just can't imagine we would notice anything. But mostly the reason I decided not to do that is because it wouldn't have mattered what it sounds like, because even if somebody told me that it sounded a little better without the shellac, I'm still gonna shellac the cabinet. So here she is. Now this is about 4 coats. Now you'd only have to do 2 to 3, but you can do 10 if you'd like. It's a really thin finish, and the more you layer it, the more kind of nice it's gonna get. It's been a couple days and you can already see how it's already kind of like amber up, as I like to call it. It's not that bright yellow. It has a hard finish, but it still feels kind of like tweed. It doesn't have any kind of like sticky residue, and it doesn't have any kind of barbs or fraying. It just feels very vintage. The amp looks like it came out of a closet from 50, 60 years ago, and it's been sitting there in pristine condition waiting for us. I'm very excited about this. I'd like to thank the guys at Stu Mac. Without them, we wouldn't be doing this video today. They sent the shellac and the Behkol alcohol so that we could do this finish. And of course this kit, which we'll be doing just so you guys can see what it's like to do a kit. Again, thank you to the guys at Stu Mac for making this video possible. And to all of you for hanging out with me today. As always, thank you so much for your time. And until next time, know your gear. So I'm gonna use a turkey baster, and I'm gonna use a really quick, easy kind of, let's go ahead. And using actual flakes, shellac, and we're gonna be actually using, and we're gonna use actual flakes. We use shellac flakes.